Hi, I'm Chris Bainham-Hughes, Customer Innovation Advocate at Red Hat's Open Innovation Labs. And today, I'm here with Tim Beattie, our Global Head of Product. I'm here to get an insight into one of the residencies that we're running with one of our automotive clients. Now, we get to work with an amazing array of customers across all economic sectors. And what we see is that the differentiator between the high and low performers is rarely about technology, and it's more about the organization's culture and practices. So at Red Hat, we believe that open unlocks the world's potential. So to help our customers change the world, we came up with the Open Innovation Labs Residency. And what that does is we take our customer team and we immerse them in our open culture and practices, and we pair them with our technology experts so they get the very best out of Red Hat. Now, we'd rather show than tell, so today we're going to use one of our practices, Walk the Walls, to get an insight into this residency. Tim, could you tell us a bit about Walk the Walls?
Yeah, sure. So at Open Innovation Labs, we really believe in the idea of visualizing our work in a very transparent way. And the idea is that we can literally walk the walls with a stakeholder or someone who's interested in this team or this product. And through having a good old-fashioned conversation and looking at the artifacts on the wall, that person should be able to get whatever information they're looking for. So it's really, really powerful.
Sure. Okay, well, let's get stuck in. So let's have a look at the walls. So, okay, first thing that really pops out of me is not only the work's visualized and up there so I can go and have a look at it, but it's the colors as well. Really pulls in the energy.
Yeah.
So what's up first?
Is a practice called the social contract, which is something we tend to do with teams in day 1 or day 2 of the residency. This is a contract that the team members put in place with each other about how they want to work together, how they want to behave. And this team came up with some really great ideas when they put together their social contract. So things like mob to learn, pair to build. I love that as a principle. Or share the knowledge, really, really important. Or even it's okay to be wrong. And all of the team members have signed this social contract so they can keep each other accountable to it and keep each other honest. And they tend to hang it and display it in a very public area, so it's very transparent about their behaviors. And it's a living, breathing artifact, so that means the team can adapt it as they go along. And as they learn more and more about working with each other and what's working and what's not, they can improve the social contract and keep that living and breathing. And another practice that we do in the first day or 2 is all about aligning and agreeing on the target outcomes for the residency. So the engagements here are between 4 and 12 weeks. So these are the measurable target outcomes that we want to achieve during that 4 to 12 week period. And the 3 outcomes that this team came up with, actually pretty typical of the residencies that we do. So there's one around increasing adoption of DevOps across the business. There's one all around having an application, in this case support articles, up and running in production. And then finally, there's one about having the team feel happy and excited and empowered about working this way and working with this product. So again, it's something that we radiate, we hang on the wall, and it reminds us why we're here and what we're trying to achieve in this time working together.
Great. Okay, so we've got how we're going to behave and how we're going to work together. We've got what we're actually trying to achieve. Brilliant. Impact mapping. This is certainly one of my favorite practices. I love the way it brings everybody in, and it can generate not only purpose for the people who are delivering, but also alignment across, so everybody's clear on what we're building. Tell us a bit more about this.
Absolutely. I mean, even the act of having a wide group of stakeholders together and agreeing and aligning on the goal of why we're here, often this will come down from some strategy, but just to be able to write it up and have everybody have that shared understanding. In this case, the goal was all around improving the consumer's experience, having better informed technicians, and improving the support approach. And the stakeholders came up with some really great measures that they could use then to determine whether they were meeting the goal. The second part of impact mapping is then getting everyone aligned on the actors. Who are the people that can help achieve this goal or may impede the goal. And what do we call them? Because sometimes people have got different terminology that they use. So this is about getting that shared understanding and alignment. And then we determine what are the impacts, what are the measurable impacts that we want to achieve on those actors to help achieve the goal. So for example, decrease the need to create cases, or increase case quality. These are all things that we can measure now and we can measure in the future as we go along to again determine whether we are achieving our goal via those actors. And then finally we come up with all of the outputs, all of the deliverables that we think could help achieve the outcomes or the impacts on the actors.
Yeah, fantastic. So essentially we end up with these sort of hypotheses as to how we're going to achieve these goals, right? And so that's really important when we're trying to solve complex problems, because you have to take an experimental approach and it has to go that way.
Absolutely. So we can read this from right to left. We take an example. We hypothesize that if we build a single sign-on solution, it will have this impact: reduce the time to create case on these people, the case agent, to help achieve the goal. And during impact mapping, we'll then facilitate some dot voting or investment simulation so that stakeholders can vote, where do they want to place some investment? Where do we want to place some bets? Where do we want to run some experiments to prove or disprove those hypotheses as we get into the residency? Awesome.
And the other aspect I love about this is the way that it really just surfaces assumptions that people have made. So, the example you gave with the single sign-on, if we spoke to the case agent, we might find they say, well, this isn't our problem at all, actually. Our problem is really somewhere else. So we can start to sort of test those ideas out and make sure we're building the right thing up front before we even hit the keyboard.
Absolutely. It's so collaborative, and just having all of this information and everybody looking at the same thing really creates that alignment and shared understanding.
Yeah, great. I love that inclusivity. Well, fantastic. So what's next?
So next is one of my favorite practices. It's event storming.
Okay, brilliant. Well, let's walk that wall.
Cool, let's do it. Okay, so event storming is a practice that brings to life the idea of domain-driven design. It was created by a guy called Alberto Brandolini, and he came up with this wonderful color coding to visualize business processes in a way that we can iteratively and incrementally deliver value. So when we run an event storming session, we bring everyone together. We bring technical people, developers, infrastructure people, designers, business domain experts, even end users. And they all collaborate to generate these event storms. And there's three examples here. We always start our event storms with the term "the one where." So the one where someone logs into the application, or the one where support articles are managed. And the first step of the event storm is to come up with all of these orange sticky notes. Orange sticky notes are events. These are things that someone cares about happening, and they're all written in the past tense. So something like app opened, auth page provided, custom claim received. And even the act of getting everybody on the same page as to how these business processes fit together really provides that alignment and shared understanding, which is hugely powerful to do up front. We then start to evolve the event storm, and we bring in some of these other parts like the commands, the aggregates, the policies, and the screen layouts to bring even more information onto the wall.
Again, it's awesome. I love it, and I love the color. It sort of really gives a lot of energy. It looks like it's a lot of fun to produce, and I love the inclusivity angle again. So getting that rounded problem, so we're really tackling what's going to make a difference and really have that impact. Building the right thing, I guess, really.
Absolutely, and what I love about this is the things that fall out of the event storm. So there's something for everyone. You can see here some of the UI screen designs and some of the ideas coming up here, and UX designers can then start to run experiments and research with the information they're getting from the event storm. The way the event storm is presented allows us to build these kind of little areas, these little bubbles of functionality, and they can be built in microservices and deployed into containers. So it allows us to build out the application in an iterative and incremental way, because the logical architecture emerges from the event storm itself. So it's awesome. It's something for everyone.
Yeah, and I love the language. The language is all sort of plain English. So as you say, someone from the business can join in and have a real impact on the architecture. That doesn't happen often, right?
Yeah, and these actually will become features on our product backlog, so the business then start to see how this translates into software development.
Fantastic. Okay, so speaking of the business sort of looking to see the impact and to understand what's going on in this, often when we work with customers, they have really a complex series of handovers that's sort of in a bit of a black box called the IT department, and it's not really clear or exposed what goes into actually releasing a product or getting it there. So how do we expose that, and how do we look to make improvements from that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges that we often see with our customers, it takes them a really long time from an initial idea or initial request from a user or business stakeholder to actually having software running in production. And we often get asked, how can we bring that time down? And the practice I love using to visualize that is called metrics-based process mapping, which is the next practice on our walk the walls. And again, I love this because it allows us to visualize all the things that happen between the initial request from the user or the customer all the way to that running in production, everything that needs to happen.
Wow, so that whole sort of ask to get is there. So these different swim lanes, what does this represent?
Yeah, so when we ran this, we learned that to release software, we were having to use lots of different people from different departments in the organization. So every time we cross one of these horizontal lines, it's actually a handover or a handoff, or we're having to raise a ticket on another team to do something. And that's actually quite inefficient. There's a lot of wastage, there's a lot of time being delayed between those steps and those handoffs. So we try to remove those where we can.
Yeah, sure. And anybody can come and walk up and look at this and see there are efficiency gains to be had, I guess, right? But what do these numbers mean on the? Yeah,
so for each of the things that happen between the initial request and the delivery to production, we take three key metrics. We take the amount of time it takes to do the thing, then the actual lead time, so how long between the previous step finishing and the next step starting, including all of the wait time and the delay time. And then the completeness and accuracy percentage, so how accurate, how complete is that particular task when it happened, or how often do we have to revisit it. And like you say, when we surface this information, we start to see opportunities where we can optimize and improve those metrics.
Well, yeah, I mean, if 1 in 10 is actually coming through correctly, and there's also a weak lag between actually completion and sort of moving on, or the overall time rather, that's just an obvious place to start, right? I guess you can start picking out where you want to, where you're going to have the most impact.
Absolutely, and when we total all of these things up, in this case, I think we could see it took something like 35 weeks to deliver a release. So we could see why there was only 1 or 2 releases a year happening to production, and there are clear areas that we could look to optimize.
Sure. Wow. Okay, so we know where we want to, what we want to optimize. We've got our architecture. I guess we now need to sort of do the sprint planning and sort of, or the iteration that we're going to run for delivery. So is that next?
Yeah, so basically the impact map, the event storm, the metrics-based process map, and this has given us lots of great ideas of stuff that we can now go and do during our residency. So we use a practice to organize all of those ideas into small slices of value, and the practice is called value slicing.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Let's go.
Cool. All right, so value slicing is a practice where we can bring all of the ideas, all of the features, all of the learnings that have come out of the previous practices and allow us to organize by value.
Okay, so where have these pieces come from? How does this all work? How does this come together?
Yeah, so you remember those 3 outcomes that we set out at the beginning of the residency? What we've done is we've put those 3 outcomes along the spine of our value slice. So the increased adoption of DevOps, the application, which we've broken down into a slightly lower level spine, and the happy, excited and empowered team. And what we've done with all of the items that have fallen out of the previous practices, we've made sure that it is going to take us to one of those outcomes. So it's categorized under one of those outcomes.
Awesome. Okay, so what are these green lines about? What does this represent?
Yeah, so what we do is we work with our customer's product owner, and maybe their stakeholders will come in as well. And we'll ask, how can we slice, how can we deliver increments of value during this residency? We don't want to just focus on delivering the application, because we heard that you want to increase adoption of DevOps and you want to have a happy, excited, and empowered team. So we hand this board over to the product owner, and they work in producing horizontal slices of value so that we tackle the high value items first, and we can deliver increments of the solution that's always delivering value as we go along.
Okay, great. And I guess that gives us a point to celebrate each sort of step change of the value delivery.
That's right. We don't want to just have one big bang celebration at the end. We want to be able to celebrate lots of releases as we go into a world of continuous delivery.
Yeah, keep that happy, excited, empowered team, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so then we're taking it to what looks like a product backlog?
Yeah, that's right. So we literally copy the items at the top of the value slice board, and we put that to the top of our product backlog, and then the next slice and the next slice and so on. This was the product backlog, I think, after we'd done about 3 sprints of development. So we've got a lot of stuff that had been done. We've got some stuff in the 4th sprint. And the product backlog is a living, breathing artifact. So we can always be updating it. We can always be refining it. We can always be putting stuff by updating the previous artifacts as well.
Okay, great. So what are these numbers on that represent it?
So the numbers here, this is a practice that this team chose to use around relative sizing. So they're story points, and allows them to discuss and align and agree on the relative size of complexity for delivering that piece of work according to the acceptance criteria of that feature in place.
Okay, great. And how do they come to those numbers? Is that so one person decides, is that the product owner, or?
No, it's a really collaborative exercise, and there's lots of little tools, things like planning poker and estimation ladders that our teams use. The real reason we do it is to get conversation going and get alignment and shared understanding, so that it becomes a team problem and a team response to delivering the solution.
Sure. Okay. Great. So I'm seeing another backlog over here.
You are, yeah.
Talk through that. Is that?
Yeah, so obviously this is our product backlog that our product owner builds using practices before. Then every week in a residency, we run a sprint, an iteration, and this is where the team pull the top items from the product backlog, and they create a sprint backlog. And this was actually the sprint 4 backlog in this residency, where the team had a goal around completing the user journey for creating an article and refining the responsiveness and authenticated users. So in the sprint planning session, they decompose the product backlog item down into low-level tasks. So this is all of the development tasks, the coding, the testing, the infrastructure improvements that they do during the sprint.
Okay, so that's why I'm seeing the big tickets mapped to theirs, but the smaller tickets, they're tasks within to deliver that bigger ticket.
That's right. So we're providing the traceability of what the low-level tasks are to deliver the valuable features. And we can go further. We can see where that sits on the relative value slicing board. We can think about where that sits on the event storing board and where it fits into the business process. We can even trace all the way back to the impact that we want to have on the actors in the impact map.
I love it. I love it. I love the idea that I could walk in, see all of these up on the board, not disturb anybody from the team, and I could walk my way through and see that progression. See, there's a logical flow to it that allows me to see where we're up to and to really get a feel for what's going on. So what about the different coloured stickies? Do they represent anything, or?
Yeah, so we work with cross-functional teams. So the teams are typically made up of all of the skill sets needed to deliver a full increment of the product. So we'll have front-end tasks, which will be one colour, back-end development tasks, which will be another, infrastructure or data tasks, which will be another, even things like documentation and workshops, which need to occur to deliver done software. So the fact that we're using different colours here shows that we've got the cross-functional aspect in the team to deliver value in the features that they're building.
Excellent. Okay, so how about sharpening the saw? How about sort of continuous improvement? What do we do around that?
Continuous improvement is a part of our DNA, and we have some great practices to help us with that. Another of my favourite practices is the Retrospective, and that's the next part of our Walk the Walls.
Lead on.
Cool. So the retrospective practice is something that we do at least once a week during our residencies, as we really want to drive continuous improvement into the DNA of all of our customers and all of our teams. So we have lots of different formats of retrospectives that we run. This one's called the 3 Ls. So at the end of sprint 3, the team came up with, what did they like during the sprint, what did they learn during the sprint, and what did they long for or lack during the sprint. And this is just a short, time out to reflect on what's worked well and how can this team make themselves even better in the following sprint. So they always come up with some retrospective actions. They will always pull those into the subsequent sprint, and they will always revisit at the next retrospective to see the impact of the retrospective actions that they've put in place. So such an important practice, and this is just one of many, many formats that we do in our residencies.
Yeah, I think the retrospective is just one of the most useful, and I'm always astonished at how frequently it's overlooked and people just don't do it, and they carry on making the same mistakes or not addressing the issues that are there. Yeah. So what's this big picture?
It's exactly that, it's the big picture. So this is something we create during every residency, and it's all about the continuous integration and continuous delivery infrastructure we put in place using automation at the beginning of the residency, and we improve it during the residency. So we put it on a big visual like this, and these fun little drawings, so that team members and stakeholders can have a conversation and share their learning and understanding about what happens behind the scenes when we commit code. So you can see here these pipelines that are built by our push-button infrastructure. You can see the continuous build, the continuous baking of containers, the continuous deployment into OpenShift. In this particular case, we had some automated end-to-end testing and automated security scanning happening in the pipeline as well.
Great. What's this colourful sticky at the end, the green one? Big green one, the build? Yeah,
so these are some of the enhancements that we do to improve the CI/CD infrastructure by putting things like build monitors in place and lots of information radiators, radiating what's happening in the CI/CD infrastructure. So really important to get that real-time information to the teams.
So that would be up on the wall, projected in live real time.
Yeah, we've got lots of screens and projectors in our lab spaces to radiate this information.
Fantastic. I mean, I think whenever you look at something like this, you realise just how complex it is to perform these actions and to really get the pipeline going.
Yeah.
And a lot of products here.
It is, but I think with a visual like this, you can explain to someone, even someone less technical, what's actually happening, what all of the automation is doing, and why, all these wonderful open source products really help us to work in continuous delivery at a sustainable pace and build these containers running in our container platform, which is the end result of our pipelines.
Up in OpenShift, great. Okay, so now you've got me intrigued. What's this top bit here? This looks familiar. This looks like something we had earlier on. But
yeah, so you remember the metrics-based process map, and we had lots of handoffs and handovers because of all of those different parts of the organization. Mm-hmm. Well, we like to repeat that practice towards the end of the residency. And here you can see it's all in one line because we've created a new dedicated cross-functional product team. So we're not handing off to different parts of the organization. We have all of those skills within the team. So we run the same metrics again, and we actually can take metrics from a lot of this tooling around how long it takes to run the builds and the tests and the deployments and the scans and things like that. And you can see here, some of the times are down to minutes and seconds, where previously it was taking days and weeks. So when you total all of this up, you can see now we can get into much faster release cycles, much faster lead times, much higher frequency of deployments.
Yeah, and that organizational change to move it into a cross-functional team means they own it end to end. So from asks to gets, it's theirs, right? So
yep.
We see the impact and the efficiencies that you can gain from that.
That's right. And part of that is made possible from the technology, part of it from these practices and ways of working, and part of it from the organizational change of a cross-functional product team.
Cool. Okay. So we've seen a huge number of practices. How do we sort of bring that all together? Can we visualize that in some way?
Yeah. Well, I guess the final information radiator I want to show is this. So this is called the Mobius loop, which we use to connect our discovery practices to our delivery practices in a continuous flow. So you can see some of the practices that we've talked through today, such as impact mapping and metrics-based process mapping and value slicing. And you can see the delivery practices that we use in sprints. Now we've actually extended the Mobius loop, and we've built this foundation, and these are all of the cultural practices that we use to create autonomous, self-organizing teams in a space of psychological safety. And our foundation also has all of these technical engineering practices brought to life by the big picture. Yeah, exactly. So all of these practices you can read about in our open practice library, which is our open source repository of our growing list of practices and tools that we use on residencies.
Great. So you mentioned that we've extended this, so where does it originally come from?
So the Mobius Loop is an open source community which we have forked. The Open Practice Library is also an open source community that anybody can contribute to, and we keep all of our practices up to date in there.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much, Tim. That's been absolutely fantastic to get that insight from you and really understand what's going on in this residency. Been really helpful and fantastic to see the way that the practices build, and that starts to engender with the teams themselves, and that they adopt those. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun walking the walls, and you can read all about these practices and many, many more at the Open Practice Library, which you can access at www.openpracticelibrary.com/learn. If you would like to experience this for yourself with one of your teams, please get in touch with your Red Hat account executive and ignite that lasting change and deliver a real business outcome. Thanks for watching.